Now I apologize for the sins of my mother, and now I understand that nobody has the right to take the life of another human being. In all, life has to have a balance, but my mother wasn't a saint, and I know that.
Griselda Blanco was known as the Queen of Cocaine and the Godmother. She was one of the most really notorious drug lords of the Medellin cartel. This was during the 1970s and the 1980s. She was born in Colombia. She spent her early years as a pickpocket, kidnapper, prostitute on the streets of Medellin. And at age 20, she married Alberto Bravo. He was really the one who introduced her to the cocaine industry. They began pushing cocaine from Colombia into the United States, targeting several locations: New York, Southern California, and of course, Miami. So in the mid 70s, Griselda and Alberto, they moved to New York to set up their cocaine business, and they quickly took over a large share of the market from the mafia. Authorities attributed more than 250 murders to her direct orders. And, when we talk about the cocaine wars of the late 1970s, early 1980s, in which she played a pivotal role, it really brought Miami to the brink of chaos. The city's murder rate, it skyrocketed from, I believe it was 104 homicides in 1976 to a staggering 621 in 1981, as documented in the Cocaine Cowboys. And so her approach to settling disputes was, brutally efficient.
Griselda Blanco's violent and ruthless nature saw her in control of Miami's drug trade. But growing up, for young Michael, he saw her power as something extraordinary.
I guess I understood the dynamics of power because, first and foremost, my mother carried herself very powerfully. Like, she was very upright. Her posture was always great. She used to tell me, Michael, you're not born classy, but yeah, some of us are born with class. And I used to be like, wow, what a classy lady. How she conducted herself was powerful. How did I realize my mother was powerful? And a childhood memory, which was crazy, when we had relocated from New York, Miami, and now we're living in Irvine, Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and the Bay Area. I have this one memory. I actually wrote about it in my book, My Mother the Godmother. I used to play in the elevators of the salon that she was a silent partner in, and she would frequent this salon like every single day. And I used to play in the elevator, and I remember one week getting stuck in the elevator, not once, not twice, but 4 times. And I remember like knowing that I'm in so much trouble because here the firemen are back getting this kid out of the elevator, breaking the doors, getting me out. I remember my mother powerfully asking the firemen, gentlemen, I'm so grateful. Can you guys please make a line? And tipping them all for lunch. Like, this is because you guys have come out here 4 times because of this kid, and he's doing the same thing over. I'm so sorry. And I remember just all those firemen standing in line, and my mother bringing out a huge wad of money, giving them money. And I'm like, this is what she does. Bodyguards, Palm Island, resorts, boats, planes, name it. It was very, I don't want to say desensitizing to a kid, like understand, like, okay, why are we so luxurious? Why is there so much money? I did not understand that there was people still in this country living below the poverty level because I didn't see it. I just saw ponies, and if my brother had a Lamborghini, I had a mini Lamborghini. If they were world champion motorcycle racers, well, then I got to be a world champion motorcycle racer. I got the motorcycles. Hey, why are we in Daytona and we're the only people here on the speed race, on the speed track? And now I get it. They were so powerful that they moved different. Now that I understand what it is to be a hardworking man, but I also understand that there's different tax brackets, and there's people that live luxurious, and there's people that live a middle class life.
While Griselda was known for many husbands, Michael's father was known as the actor, and the two had a special bond.
My father was Rubén Darío Sepúlveda, also known as El Actor, the actor. My mother would name him the actor, and it was because he was real good at telling lies when he was cheating on her, like an actor, like an Oscar award-winning actor. She would tell him, "You deserve an Oscar, mother," you know? My father was the first man to rob the National Bank of Colombia. He was a bank robber turned assassin, and him and his brothers basically controlled the criminals in Pereira in Colombia. They were very savage. So he became a king of bandits, and Griselda in the 1970s needed muscle. So she went to Pereira and she got the best bandits and bank robbers and assassins in town and told them, "Look, you guys now are part of our cartel." So now it's the Sepúlveda Trujillo Blanco cartel. They were very vicious, but they were also very good at what they did, which was protecting her and being the enforcers for our cartel.
But Michael would lose his father at a young age when Dario was killed in front of him.
As I mentioned before, and maybe one of the most chilling moments of her reign, she allegedly ordered the assassination of her third husband, Dario, in front of her young son, Michael. And so the violence surrounding Griselda really extended far beyond rival cartels. Innocent bystanders, children, often caught in the crossfire of, her power struggles.
When I was speaking at the Mom Museum, I had to cut it off a little short because I always get emotional telling it. It was like a scene from The Godfather. I mean, to this moment, I could smell the gunpowder. I could hear the church bells ringing. I could smell and feel the fabric of nuns' clothing as they jumped on me and stopped the hitman from killing me. The schoolgirls and how they covered me with their hands so that the assassins wouldn't kidnap me or kill me. And it's quite traumatizing, and I deal with a lot of PTSD. I deal with a lot of survivor's guilt.
Griselda's reign came to an end by the mid-1980s. On February 17, 1985, Blanco was arrested in her California home by DEA agents and subsequently charged with conspiracy to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. The case went to trial in federal court, where she was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison. While serving her sentence, she was charged with 3 additional counts of first-degree murder by the state of Florida. In 1998, Blanco pled guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years in prison to run concurrently.
When I was a child, I didn't understand what it was not to live in the lap of luxury. Now, later on, when my whole family was incarcerated, I went through hard times, and I write about that in my Mother the Godmother. I started paying rent when I was 13 years old. How many kids do that? Times change, It was very impactful to know how powerful, how rich my family was. And then it was also very hard later on not living in the lap of luxury. You go from this level of life, but now you're here in this level. I remember being a kid living in South Central Los Angeles, and I had a dog walking business. I had a landscaping business. I'd do anything for $1 because I was always a hustler, I guess, because of what my family taught me. But I never thought that I wouldn't have what I wanted. When I was a young boy before 7 years old, and I'd go into any store and I would just point it out. And then later on, going from wearing Jordans to Payless shoe stores or Big Five sporting goods store shoes that nobody knew what the heck that shoe was. And the kids would make fun of you because they have their Jordans on there. Like, what are those called? Your Turnatex or your Pro Flyers? And I remember wait, how come my clothes have holes in them if my family's filthy rich? No, your family's in jail. So now you don't have nothing. And that was very hard for me, being that young Michael Corleone Blanco now, not having his family's wealth. Up to my teenage years, it affected me a lot because I didn't want to get close to people, or I really didn't know how to trust anybody. And I've had a lot of legal guardians in my life they were in charge of me, and I always looked at it as a part-time thing.
Michael has now documented his life in his autobiography, My Mother the Godmother, which was about his upbringing and following in his parents' footsteps. In 2011, he was charged with trying to buy 5 kilos from an undercover detective in Florida. He initially pled not guilty, but served some time under house arrest.
As now a 46-year-old man with children of myself, I know that a family really needs stability. And I guess my parents, mostly my mother and my brothers, started to figure out that it was affecting me as a young boy so much, because I was homeschooled and we were always bouncing, and I hate to say it, but kind of like the movie Heat.
Allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner.
Don't have nothing that you're attached to, that have your suitcase in the car that you see the heat around the corner. And that's what my mother trained me as. I always had a suitcase ready to go by the door, in my room, and in the cars.
Michael says writing his memoir took many years, but was a cathartic experience.
And it took so long for me to understand what I was writing, but as a man, it also took me quite a bit to understand that I was responsible as an author what I was giving to the world. So my narrative and my truth had to be humbling, but it had to be positive as well. I know I lived a negative life and my family weren't saints and my mother wasn't a saint, but what I did in writing this book is try to give a message, an answer to the question of society, what is right, what is wrong, and just try to give a positive aspect on how I changed my life and how millions of people can change their life, or young men, young adults can change their lives, and that we're not governed by our past trauma or by our family's sins. In my case, my family's sins.
Michael spoke at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas this past fall and shocked the audience with some of his stories.
I was certainly surprised by our conversation, and I think a lot of people in the audience were surprised as well. Some of the events that he witnessed when he was a child, especially the murder of his father, and then, finding out from others that his mother was responsible for that, for his killing. And he still gets choked up about it to this day. And, he says he needs a minute to talk about it, because it is, in a sense, very raw to him. And, he was right next to his father when that happened. And so, he also did see firsthand, and feels firsthand the destruction that his mother left behind. And, he'll never be able to talk to his father again. And that is because of his mother. And so I think he has now probably accepted that. He probably could have written this book years ago. And I think it's been a personal reflection, for him to really go through his family's history and to, write down what he remembers from that time, and to, I guess, come to terms with, where things stand now and what he wants to do in the future.
In 2004, in light of her frail health, Griselda Blanco was granted compassionate release from prison in the United States and deported back to Colombia.
After years as a fugitive, she was arrested in 1985, sentenced to decades in prison, and she was released in 2004, deported to Colombia. And this sort of twist of irony, I think, she was killed in 2012 at the age of 69. This was in Medellin by a motorcycle assassin, the very method that she was known for introducing. Her life was really marked by violence, this sort of innovation in the drug trade, and a ruthless approach to business that really secured her a place as one of the most infamous figures in the history of drug trafficking.
At the moment, I was teaching my youngest son how to swim with my eldest son. And I remember getting the phone call on my cell phone. Shocking, But at the same time, being accustomed to being slapped in the face by my reality and the reality of my family, it's a phone call that for years I was expecting. My mother was released in 2004. She wasn't assassinated to 8 years later. And you think, okay, she's in the clear. It's been so long. She's gonna live her later years, in the lap of luxury, living life nice and calm as an old lady. And yet she was assassinated savagely. I was teaching my son how to swim. I get the call, and the individual on the other line tells me, "Little boss, I don't want to hurt you, but I'm looking at La Gordita." Gordita was the name from my mother. Chubby lady is what we call her in the household. And as soon as he said, "I'm looking at La Gordita," I understood, and I said, "Oh no. Don't say that." First, he's telling me, I don't want to tell you this, but I have to. I thought he was going to tell me something else, that, my other brother was assassinated or something. And then when he tells me I'm looking at La Gordita, I realize that he's standing over the body of my mother. And it broke me to the core. As a suburban father, I didn't want to show my kids this pain right now that I'm feeling in that moment. So as we enter the house, I remember telling my ex-wife, and then like the floor slipped up from under me and I just fell to the floor and pounded on the floor crying, because my mother was my best friend. Me and my mother were real close, even during her incarceration, and now that she had been released, we had grown even more close. And I hadn't seen her since, in physical form, since 1995, I think. So then it really broke my heart, that knowing that I probably, that I wasn't gonna be able to see her again. So it was very impactful, and I grew closer to God. I want to say those days I was not able to bury her, but I took care of the funeral arrangements from here, and with family in Colombia, that the little family that's still alive, they were able to do it. And I want to thank El Barrio Antioquia, the neighborhood my mother's from, because the whole neighborhood buried her. And, my little cousin was able to travel. He's a U.S. citizen, and he was able to help me bury her, along with a lot of friends that I grew up with. They carried the casket. It's crazy because a lot of my friends carried the casket to my brother and my mother, because I wasn't able to.
In the years since Griselda's assassination, her cult of personality has grown in pop culture, and her story continues to intrigue.
¿Cómo caminaba? Como la jefa.
Well, we have the Mob Museum, right? And so, I think the renewed interest in Griselda Blanco's story, it can be attributed to several factors. So first, you have the release of some of these documentaries, like the Cocaine Cowboys in 2006. You have the Cocaine Cowboys 2, Hustling with the Godmother in 2008. And so that really brought her story to a wider audience, sort of sparking this curiosity about this complex and controversial figure. Secondly, there's, I think, a growing cultural fascination, as we know, with true crime stories, especially those involving these powerful figures like Griselda. So her role as a woman who rose to the top of a male-dominated criminal world, I think it challenges the traditional narratives about organized crime and makes her story particularly intriguing. The passing of time, I think, has also allowed for a more just a nuanced examination of the cocaine trade's impact on American society and culture. And then you have the emergence of some of these TV shows and some of these movies that are inspired by the cocaine trade era, such as The Narcos, Queen of the South.
A lot of people hate, a lot of people congratulate, a lot of people will speculate, but I had to understand from every walk of society, why do my own people hate me? Why is there Colombians criticizing me from being on a TV show or for being on a reality docu-series. Why are they hating me if I'm legally feeding my family? But then I had to understand from their point of view how I was still glorifying that narrative, and how if they just buried a loved one due to this extreme violence from another cartel that we had no relationship with, they can still blame me. And before I used to think, oh, that's wrong, you can't. But now I understand that they could. And somebody needed to be blamed, and somebody needed to change the narrative. So that's what I've done to this day.
For Michael, as he works to grapple with his past to make for a better tomorrow, he sees his future in his own family, while making up for the sins of his mother as best he can.
Kids. Honestly, my beautiful wife, my children, they give me the strength as a man to carry on. To not, I get sentimental just even talking about it, because somebody's got to do it. What am I going to give the responsibility to my kids to like clear my name up? No, my brothers would always tell me, hey, you're going to go to Yale, you're going to major in history or be a lawyer, be whatever. You're going to be the face of the family. And it's sad to say that, because I never had those mirrors or those examples, it took me so long to understand that, yes, that was my responsibility, and it is my responsibility to now be the face of my family and somehow like clean the slate. I guess when you've lost so many members of your family and you've seen unadulterated violence and you become so familiar with death, you start to understand that it's so bad, it's so evil. So how does one try to dilute that or try to make excuses for that? One does not, because it comes to the point that, let's just say she was guilty of most of that. It's a lot of evil done to society, and it's a lot of generational sin, and it's a lot of children and parents that are hurt by the loss of these loved ones. So as a man now, part of society, part of the fabric of society, a father, all I can do is apologize for that pain that my family is responsible for, or was responsible for.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Sal Bono.